by the time we get third quarter GDP, everything's going to be completely baked in. And they know that going out and saying we're in a recession and we have 9% inflation rates, nothing else really matters. I mean, this is James Carville back in 1992 famously said it's the economy stupid about Clinton versus Bush Sr. and Ross Perot back in that election. Nothing else is going to matter when we are in a recession, which we will be come Thursday officially, I believe. And also, we already know we have 9.1% inflation. Everything else is a desperate attempt to make people not see what is directly in front of their face every time they go to a gas station, a grocery store, a convenience market. Wherever you are, you can feel that cost. It is real. We know that language is constantly being changed inside of the Biden administration. For instance, men can get pregnant. The definition of what a man and a woman isn't even set in stone. And over the weekend, the White House began to try to get their talking points out. So to give you a little bit of a context, Thursday in the morning early, we will get the official GDP for the second quarter in this country. You'll remember that the first quarter, that number was negative. And we have been telling you for months on this show that we believe there will be a recession, and in fact that we're already in a recession. And the way that we've been defining that is by 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth is the standard definition for a recession that pretty much everybody uses across the landscape of this country. And so we said, look, we're negative in quarter one, and that number surprised people. And then we've updated you with what was likely to happen in April, May, and June. And I don't need to tell all of you how bad the economy has been, how challenging it has been from an inflation perspective, and just a growth perspective in general. So over the weekend on the official White House website, and I'm going to read for you, this is the work of Jackie Heinrich, is the first person who I saw do it. The White House put up a new definition of recession. Really, this, and I want to read this. I know you saw this too, Buck. What is a recession? This is from the direct White House website. While some maintain 2 consecutive quarters of falling real GDP constitute a recession, that is neither the official definition nor the way economists evaluate the state of the business cycle. And then there's further definition. Based on these data, it is unlikely the decline in GDP in the first quarter of this year, even if followed by another GDP decline in the second quarter, indicates a recession. Buck, this to me is clear evidence, as if we needed it at all, that the number is going to be negative on Thursday, that the second quarter GDP is going to be negative as well, and that for purposes of this show and anywhere else where people live with a functional brain, we will be in a recession, no matter what the White House might be trying to do to convince us that 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth is not actually a recession.
I just can't help but remember when the first 18 months of the Trump presidency, all we were hearing was that it's the Obama economy, right? That was the talking point from Democrats, because all of a sudden stock market's booming, business is flying, everything's going great. And now we're 18 months into the Biden presidency, and it's a recession's not really a recession, everybody. I mean, this is the exact thing you would expect. The redefinition of words, your lying eyes aren't telling you what's really going on. Listen to us, not your lying eyes, the Democrats, the Biden White House says, which is right in line with what you'd have to assume they would do here, because otherwise, what is it? What's it going to be? What are we going to be told? I mean, Clay, they're in a bad position even without the R word, recession, coming into the equation. People already, super high inflation, high gas price, high price of everything. We need to even stop. The gas price is just the indicator. Everything is more expensive now. And you're seeing more and more analysis out there about how, it turns out that it's not just gas that you put in your car, it's gas that's necessary to get your milk and your eggs to the store. It's gas that's necessary to make, or, diesel, to bring the products to the store and to make the fertilizer and to make actually a whole range of products. Petroleum, 50% of the petroleum used is actually going into stuff, not even used in oil and gasoline for cars. So everything's more expensive. You add recession onto where the Democrats currently are. I mean, they're heading in for the biggest wipeout, certainly in terms of the end position, right? As you've pointed out, Clay, and it's important, because they don't have a big lead, they don't have as many seats to lose. But in the end state, this is going to be looking like this is going to be the worst position they've been in, certainly, I think, in the House in decades.
It's possible, depending on how exactly the numbers shake out, that Republicans will have the most House seats that they've had in 100 years by the time the midterms are over. So, and that could happen with only a gain of 30-ish seats, depending on how exactly all of those seats shake out. That would be a 100-year high for Republican support in the House. So there's going to be an attempt, and you can already see it a little bit. Taking over the House is a foregone conclusion. It's a question of how much the House will be taken over. There's already an attempt now to say, oh, it's not as bad, similarly to what we're seeing the recession redefined before our very eyes. Buck, if you and I had come on at the end of the year and we had said in December, hey, inflation's going to be 9%. This is just 6 months ago. And we're also going to have 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. First quarter, second quarter. People would have lost their mind at that prediction, and it would have been a clear indication that we were going to go into a recession. We have been telling people, and I think we're going to be right when this number comes out on Thursday, that second quarter GDP was likely to be down as well. For several months, we've been saying when that happens, we're officially in a recession for all intents and purposes based on the way that recessions are defined for decades. And now suddenly the Biden White House is saying, oh, technically, and it's true, technically there is a committee that assesses a wide range of factors and then says, oftentimes after you're no longer in the recession, oh, we actually had a recession. For everyone else, we can just look at the GDP and say, when you go negative, that's a recession.
I also want to just state this. I want this to be something that we're all thinking about. Put this on the record. The Democrats deserve this. I mean, they deserve the coming electoral shellacking. They deserve to get crushed, to have people who are elected representatives lose their jobs as they currently have them. Lose their elected position. Go get a real job. Like they deserve to face the wrath of voters. Joe Biden and remember, Biden we can use as a stand-in here for the Democrats, the Pelosi Democrats in the House. They said they'd do a better job on COVID, that they would unite the country, that we would return to normalcy. They were the most divisive, really, imaginable, especially around the issue of COVID. Joe Biden was saying it was a pandemic of the unvaccinated, a federal vaccine mandate that the Supreme Court had to stop, and the fundamental promise of the Biden administration was, I'm not going to shut down the economy, I'm going to shut down the virus. That's actually the inverse of what happened. He's shutting down the economy. He's destroying the economy with all the spending and all the regulation and also all the anti-energy sentiment and government action. And obviously they didn't shut down the virus, and we were all very aware it's still spreading around. Joe Biden has COVID right now, so pretty clear he didn't shut down the virus. And you remember, Clay, in the first couple of years of the Trump presidency, what was the maniacal unbelievable, markets booming, countries at peace. What was the big focus? Russiagate.
Yes.
I mean, so if you're looking at the results of the Trump presidency 18 months in are things are going great and things are way beyond the expectations the media set. Results of the Biden presidency, it's not that bad, we promise.
Here's Janet Yellen, by the way, your Treasury secretary, saying, hey, a common definition of recession, 2 negative quarters of GDP growth. Listen to this.
GDP will be closely watched. A common definition of recession is 2 negative quarters of GDP growth, or at least that's something that's been true in past recessions. When we've seen that, there has usually been a recession. And many economists expect second quarter GDP to be negative. First quarter GDP was negative. So we could see that happen, and that will be closely watched. But I do want to emphasize what a recession really means is a broad-based contraction in the economy. And even if that number is negative, we are not in a recession now.
Buck, it really is amazing how they all get their talking points in line. They went out this weekend. Again, the number comes out on Thursday, and there are going to be a lot of people in the New York Times, Washington Post, MSNBC, CNN, who will accept that 2 consecutive negative quarters of GDP is not a recession because the Biden White House is trying to spin that this doesn't qualify as a recession.
Did you ever, in the early days, did you ever watch the earlier seasons of American Idol? Because you didn't watch it.
I never watched. I'm like the most tone deaf person. I've never watched an episode of American Idol.
Okay, so let me just set the scene.
I know, but I am very familiar with what the show does.
I would guess in terms of this. I guess in terms of our audience, 75% of the audience has at least watched one episode of it. Like
I agree.
In the early days,
it was wildly
I used to watch it
popular.
with my parents. You know, it started in like 2000, whatever, early 2000s. Anyway, I bring it up just because one of the most amazing things, like one of the more entertaining things, was that in every season there was somebody who would come up there who was absolutely horrible.
Yeah, I know that.
And
yes.
but their attitude to the judges was, "Oh yeah, you think I'm out of tune? You think I'm not good? I'll come back here when I'm quadruple platinum and you guys will be sorry." And they were like laughing and the whole thing.
Yeah.
That is the Biden administration economy. They are the American Idol contestant who's like, "You don't understand how genius I actually am." Nah, the American people are hearing it and they realize way out of tune. It's not good.
Well, and here's what they're really afraid of, Buck. This is, by the time we get third quarter GDP, everything's going to be completely baked in. And they know that going out and saying we're in a recession and we have 9% inflation rates, nothing else really matters. I mean, this is James Carville back in 1992 famously said it's the economy stupid about Clinton versus Bush Sr. and Ross Perot back in that election. Nothing else is going to matter when we are in a recession, which we will be come Thursday officially, I believe. And also, we already know we have 9.1% inflation. Everything else is a desperate attempt to make people not see what is directly in front of their face every time they go to a gas station, a grocery store, a convenience market. Wherever you are, you can feel that cost. It is real. And that failure of the economy. And so whether you're trying to make it abortion or January 6th or really any other distraction, it's not going to work.
Also worth noting that Bush would have won that election if Ross Perot had not run as an independent. Something to keep in the back of our minds here as we enter another presidential cycle. Bill Clinton only became president because Ross Perot got almost 19% of the vote.
If I were in the White House, I would not be out there sort of denying it's a recession. The fact is that the first quarter was big and negative. The second quarter, according to GDP Now and other real-time forecasts, is also going to be negative. We get that, basically this week. And then you got 2 negative quarters. If you go back to World War II, we've had 2 negative quarters 10 times. Every single time was in a recession. And so we're 10 for 10. And so for the White House to be in denial, I think is the wrong thing. If I were in the White House right now and I were advising President Biden, then what I would say is, hey, we're getting really bad economic data, and we need to basically get out in front of it, let people know that we've got the bad economic data, that probably is a recession, but then we need to have a plan to fix it. And so I think that one of the reasons why they're in denial is they don't have a plan to fix it. And so they're just in denial. So they were in denial about inflation. Now they're in denial about the recession.
Denial about inflation, denial about the recession. Well put there by former Trump economic advisor Kevin Hassett. This is exactly where they are. It's not only that they don't have a plan to fix it, which is obvious. I think, Clay, the bigger challenge for the Democrats is that the things that they would normally, and we know this, they're reflexive. Okay, what do we do? What do we do? Let's raise taxes and effectively push socialism a little more, right? Let's try to spend a little more money at a time of super high inflation, raise taxes, redistributing the wealth is somehow going to increase the wealth and turn this situation around, which would actually make it all worse.
Yeah, and we should mention, not that it's continuing to be news, but Joe Manchin has now tested positive for COVID as well. Why is that significant, you might be saying? Joe Biden, by the way, seems like he's going to be perfectly fine, according to the latest updates, as virtually everyone is. But Joe Manchin being out means that the Senate keeps having guys test positive for COVID, which means if they're trying to break through the 50-50 logjam, the senators have to be on the floor to be able to vote. And so Manchin now is going to be out for the rest of this week. I believe the Senate is in session next week, but the way things are going, somebody else is going to test positive. My point here is I'm not sure, because of this COVID ridiculousness, that Democrats are even going to be able to put forth 50 votes to get anything passed before they go on to their August recess, and then they come back in September for a relatively short period of time. This is all somewhat beneficial, Buck, because we've been arguing for a long time. The best thing Republicans can do right now is just keep Democrats from passing any more awful bills and then win the House, and you can't have anything passed for the next 2 years.
Do no harm, Democrats, which means do nothing.
That's unfortunate, because as bad as things are right now for Joe Biden, imagine how much worse they'd been if he actually got Build Back Better passed. It's all absolutely absurd.